We move across to the sister Isle of Tobago, where over the last couple of weeks, what has dominated headlines is a voice note circulating on social media, which suggests, it's alleged that the two voices heard speaking in the background are that of two senior officials within the Tobago House of Assembly. Well, not much has been said since then from the THA. In fact, we've only heard from those on the outside. I'm joined now by an individual who believes that the people of Tobago have been hoodwinked by the Progressive Democratic Patriots. That is the leader of the People's National Movement's Tobago Council, Mr. Ancil Dennis. He's with us via Zoom. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning to the listeners and viewers of this network. It's a pleasure to be here once again to discuss matters pertaining to the business of Tobago.
Well, let's get into your first statements with regard to the PDP hoodwinking Tobagonians. Could you expand on that a little bit, please, as to what you mean?
Well, a number of things could apply to that. Of course, the PDP, during the election campaign, made a number of promises to the people of Tobago that simply have not been delivered. And it's not just a matter of not delivering promises, but they're actually inflicting pain and hardship upon the people of Tobago. And most recently, we have this situation now with this voice recording circulating across the region, possibly the world by now, because I've received calls from as far as Barbados, people from Grenada messaging me, telling me and asking questions about this voice recording. So it has gone far and wide. And during the campaign, the then PDP, led by Farley Augustine, as the person responsible for the campaign at that time, engaged in a process where they all signed a social contract with a number of principles that they promised the people of Tobago that they were going to adhere to, two of which were, one, zero tolerance for corruption, and secondly, another principle was about using state resources responsibly. And of course, based on what we heard in that voice recording, which I believe to be the voices of the Chief Secretary and the Secretary of Education, we heard them planning to be corrupt. We heard them planning to utilize state resources for their own personal and political benefit, which is a flagrant breach of not only that social contract, but also the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And I can specifically speak to two particular pieces of legislation which may come into play here: the Prevention of Corruption Act and the Integrity in Public Life Act. And notwithstanding that, notwithstanding all the promises of transparency and accountability, today's day 13. It's 13 days since Tobagonians and persons across the entire country first heard that voice recording. And we have not even gotten the benefit of a response, not even a denial, nothing at all from this administration. Actually, they have been in hiding. They have been avoiding the media. The Chief Secretary recently, when he was cornered by a TV6 media personality, Ms. Liz Williams, he indicated that he will respond soon. And knowing the Chief Secretary, soon actually means never, because he has promised a number of things soon. Recently, he promised a reshuffle of the Executive Council. It's almost a year, and we are yet to have that. He promised the people of Tobago will get their ex gratia payment soon. 2 Christmases have passed. We are yet to hear anything about that ex gratia payment. So that is specifically at this time what I mean by the people of Tobago being hoodwinked by Farley and his team.
Mm-hmm. Specifically, this issue, because you've raised many issues there, but specifically the most recent, I suppose, which is this voice note circulating on social media. How serious is this matter beyond just troubling? Because we cannot say for sure that laws have been broken.
Well, of course, that is based on my own opinion. Um, at a cursory glance, when I looked at both the Integrity in Public Life Act and the Prevention of Corruption Act, I think it's going to be very interesting. And it is my opinion that there has been breaches of the law of those two particular pieces of legislation. And I am no lawyer, I am no judge, of course, but that is based on my own personal opinion. And of course, I expect that the Integrity Commission will have a look at this and determine how they are going to proceed. But it's a very serious matter. It's not only unethical, but as I said before, to me, my opinion is that it is illegal to utilize state resources. It is obviously illegal, actually, to utilize state resources for your own personal and political benefit. That is corruption.
Mm-hmm. Now, we are always encouraging younger people to get more involved in politics. We're always encouraging younger people who aspire to lead Trinidad and Tobago to become more and more involved. You can't make change from the outside. You can only make change when you're on the inside and you're actually more in tune with what's taking place. However, is that, being a young individual yourself, a youth of Trinidad and Tobago, though you've been in politics for a number of years, is it that is backfiring, that the maturity amongst these younger politicians do not exist?
Say that again. Is it that
the maturity amongst these younger politicians to deal with such instances and issues do not exist? Or is that unfair to suggest?
Well, I think it's an unfair suggestion. Probably Augustine is not the only young individual in politics. I myself became the island's youngest chief secretary at the age of 33 back in 2020. And before that, I entered politics in the year 2012 at the age of 25. And I've been in public life since then, and I've not engaged in any corrupt activities. Right? And there are other young politicians as well on the island of Tobago and even in Trinidad who have been in the political sphere, and the names have not been called. They have not been accused in such ways. And I wouldn't say that at all, that it's a problem with young people in politics, because there are even older persons who have found themselves in trouble, being brought before the court, some on charges at this point in time as it relates to corruption and dishonesty in public affairs. And they are older persons, 50s, some in their 60s perhaps, right? So I don't think it's a situation at all with young people specifically, but this specific individual has an issue. And I tend to see as well that power doesn't change people. I'm hearing a lot of persons saying, well, the young man has changed since he got into this position. He's no longer taking calls. He's no longer accessible. He became very arrogant. He became very, very proud. But I tend to believe that this is who the young man was all along. And now that he's in this position, those behaviors, those character flaws are simply now being amplified. So it's not a matter of him changing at all, but power reveals who you really are.
So you're suggesting that power doesn't change an individual, power reveals who the individual truly is?
Correct.
Okay. Moving beyond that, is it fair in your comments that the Progressive Democratic Patriots has hoodwinked the people of Tobago? Is it even fair to use, or label them as the Progressive Democratic Patriots now that they've shed their skin of that particular color and formulated a party of their own?
Well, interestingly, I didn't actually say the PDP. I can't remember saying exactly the PDP hoodwinking the people of Tobago. I guess we have to be specific and say that Farley and these individuals have hoodwinked Tobago in a number of ways. and maybe the PDP as well as an organization, because at the end of the day, they came to the people of Tobago under that name, under that banner, with a particular mandate, making particular promises. And guess what? This administration is no longer PDP. They were first, well, secondly, they were independent after being PDP. And within recent times, they are talking about a new political party called TPP. So I think, yes, we can be specific and say that Farley and his band of misfits have hoodwinked and continue to hoodwink the people of Tobago. But the Progressive Democratic Patriots has to take some blame and some responsibility, because I think part of the issue has to do with a lack of structure as an organization, a lack of discipline as an organization, and certainly a lack of honesty, especially towards the people of Tobago.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Dennis, we were having a conversation on Friday amongst my colleagues here on another program as to whether or not people are really talking about this issue, or whether or not it's just the media that is continuing to push to try and get a response of these allegations. One colleague suggested, she doesn't think that people are really speaking about it much. You're saying that it goes beyond just Trinidad and Tobago now. It's reached Barbados, it's reached Grenada. And another guest on the program said, people in Tobago are speaking about it. In fact, it's divided and split Tobagonians, because there are some that still support Farley Augustine. There will always be support for Farley Augustine, just as how there will always be support for the PNM Tobago Council. So is it that, silence is golden? The Chief Secretary has chosen not to come out and make a response, even though it's almost 2 weeks. But is it that we're making this a bigger issue than it actually is?
Well, again, it is a big issue, because we are talking about corruption. We are talking about an entire administration choosing by their silence to endorse this corruption. So it is a very serious matter that they cannot get away from. And to them, they may feel, to their personal benefit, that silence is golden. But what about Tobago's interests? And these are individuals, again, and this is why I said they hoodwinked Tobagonians. These are individuals who promised Tobago first, and to put the interests of Tobagonians above their own personal interests. And therefore, if that is the case, and if they promise to put Tobago's interests first, then they should have, the individuals in the voice recording should have responded within 24 hours to this issue, whether coming out to say it's not through, or whether coming out, whatever the response is, we should have had a response by now. And feeling that, the individuals who surround them, the rest of that team, who, by the way, must continue to have confidence in the Chief Secretary for him to stay on as Chief Secretary, those individuals, following this long period of silence, should have been man enough and responsible enough to say something. I'm not sure if they are talking to him privately behind closed doors, but we should have had a response from those individuals by now, right? Stating their feelings about the matter, stating their opinions on the matter, and speaking up on behalf of the people of Tobago who elected them, especially in circumstances where a few months ago they claimed that they were all independents. Having left the PDP, resigned from the PDP, of course, some people in Tobago, including me, called for fresh elections because of that situation. We felt that it continues to be undemocratic and unconstitutional for them to continue to remain in office under that banner. But notwithstanding that, they claim to be independent. And here we are now in a situation where independence should thrive, in a situation where independent voices should be willing to speak. They have chosen to remain silent. And yes, it is a major issue for the people of Tobago. The people of Tobago some are talking publicly, some are quiet, but all of Tobago, including their supporters, are shocked, are flabbergasted, are disappointed by this latest development. And yes, of course, there are some, in the name of political loyalty and in the name of sycophancy, will turn a blind eye to this. Some will even call it trivial, and some may even call it right. Because, of course, to say it is not wrong is actually to say it is right. And this cannot be right. This cannot be right at all. The people of Tobago deserves better. We deserve leaders who will not plot to be corrupt with our scarce resources. And we deserve leaders who will man up whenever faced with these kinds of circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Dennis, I would challenge you to tell me this morning, again, let me be very careful here. People may suggest you're trying to defend allegations of corruption, and by no means necessary. But at the same time, I always try to think of an individual who hasn't had allegations of corruption labeled towards them or against them. But to a certain extent, if we're being honest with each other, Mr. Dennis, this, as much as it's not benefiting the people of Tobago, it does benefit the PNM Tobago Council. It helps with any election campaign that the PNM Tobago Council will have. So, this morning as we're having this conversation, this is benefiting you to a great extent. Now, going just beyond that, the politics in Tobago, the political landscape in Tobago has evolved over the last couple of years. I mean, for the first time in 18 years, we have a new administration within the Tobago House of Assembly led by a completely different set of individuals or different political party. Is the politics of Tobago, does it need to be held at a higher standard that we could withstand scrutiny, I suppose? And if that is the case, is it that we're no step closer to that actually happening?
Well, I would want to suggest that the politics in Tobago is actually at a very high standard. And yes, you may have heard a lot of claims and a lot of talk about corruption on the part of the PNM. You've heard billions missing from the treasury. You've heard ridiculous claims about a zip line missing. You've heard allegations made against Tobagonians, even the previous political leader and myself, who are accused of all manner of evil. But where was the evidence, right? And I've always asked myself since then, since even this current chief secretary promising an audit report since September last year, promising to root out corruption from the THA. They have been there almost 2 years. They have conducted at least one audit, or an audit of at least one program, which they claimed was riddled with corruption. And to date, we have seen no evidence. To date, no politician, no public servant, nobody has been reported to the police or the Integrity Commission or any body in this country responsible for investigating and pursuing corrupt individuals. So as far as I'm concerned, that is simply old talk. I think the politics and the governance on the island has been at a very high and acceptable standard over a number of years. And it is only within recent times, since December the 6th, 2021, that standard has plummeted to lowest of lows. It has plummeted down a precipice, right, as it relates to governance, as it relates to transparency, as it relates to honesty, as it relates to delivery, as it relates to service to the people of Tobago. It has plummeted to the lowest of lows.
Mr. Dennis,
right?
Are you saying that the PNM is the only party that, has the integrity, has the transparency and the honesty to lead? Is that what you're saying?
We have demonstrated that in Tobago. And before December the 6th, 2021, I did not have that opinion. I expected, even after the PDP won, based on all the things Farley said. Of course, on the campaign trail, he told a number of lies. He misled Tobagonians in many ways, but he genuinely promised certain things, a certain kind of leadership, and therefore I expected them to at least maintain the standards that existed before, right? But having observed and having continued to live in Tobago for the past, it's about 18 months now under this administration, seeing what has transpired even before this disastrous voice recording, I am of the opinion now that based on the track record, we have to admit that the PNM is possibly the only group of individuals, the only organization that has the discipline, that has the stability, that has the experience, and that has the capacity to really lead the island of Tobago.
A couple more questions to get in actually before we bid you farewell, and you know, again, thank you for joining us this morning. This particular strategy that was being discussed in this voice recording that was circulating on social media, with regards to using employees of the state, publicly, they're employed by the state, they're paid for by the state and taxpayers' dollars, but they're doing something different for the benefit of a political party or individuals. How could we say for certain that this is not a strategy that is employed by all political parties, and this was just one that came to light? This is something that's been happening for many years. It's even happening now amongst other political parties, but this is just the one that came to light.
Well, I could say to you without fear of contradiction that is not a strategy of the PNM to hire persons and utilize them to carry out political propaganda and to lie and mislead the people of Tobago. And I would say as well, no public servant, even the personal staff of the office holders, the advisors, their personal assistants, their drivers even, no public servant has on their job description spread propaganda or engage in political work on behalf of the administration. Of course, advisors to some extent will get involved in politics in terms of the impact of policies, etc. But no public servant generally has as their job description anywhere in this country to carry out propaganda and PR and all that kind of stuff on behalf of any political organization. There must be a line drawn between the operations of the political party and the operations of the government, right? It is corrupt, it is wrong, and it is certainly not a strategy of the People's National Movement. And I think it is unfair to accuse any political party of doing such without evidence. We have evidence in this case of this particular group of individuals plotting to utilize state resources, and one of the individuals indicated that we already have persons employed already to carry out this particular task, being paid for with my tax-paying dollars, with your tax-paying dollars. And again, that is simply corrupt and criminal.
Not public servants being hired. I understand that. Thank you for your response. But what about individuals who for example, run private vlogs and are given certain positions or certain contracts, and then on their part have to spread propaganda? Is that also something that we could say falls under this category?
Well, again, now generally, I think over a period of time in this country, we have become very loose with laws, right? Because according to the rules and regulations of persons operating within the public service, those persons should not even be openly engaged in politics. Those persons should not even be openly engaged criticizing any any government or anything of the sort. But of course, over the years, we have allowed that kind of behavior. In Tobago, I've seen teachers, people who are responsible for teaching children in school, engage in criticizing the PNM when we were in office, engage in cussing out secretaries of the THA and even the chief secretary. And unfortunately, we have allowed that kind of behavior where public servants, teachers, in some cases, members of the protective services, making comments and getting directly involved in politics and this kind of behavior. And it is improper, but for some reason we have continued to allow it, and in some cases encouraged it. But when you peruse the law, such actions are not legal and proper at all as it relates to public servants. We have had even public servants in Tobago. There is a particular public servant, somebody appointed by the Public Service Commission on the Public Service Establishment, who campaigned against the PNM, ran for elections against the PNM, openly criticized the PNM. And when I say the PNM, I'm talking about the THA administration that they were employed for. We even have individuals within the THA right now employed in the THA and are part of media houses conducting interviews, interviewing THA officials, interviewing even me as political leader. So we have allowed that kind of conduct and that kind of behavior to creep into our governance structure. But it is certainly not proper because the law discourages that kind of behavior. But to answer your question directly, again, no, it is not a strategy of the PNM to hire persons and utilize them for political and party affairs, especially as it relates to propaganda, which involves misleading the people of Tobago, because it spoke to people creating fake profiles and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And when you talk fake profiles, it's about, I guess, in some cases, even defaming people who are your opponents. So it is not proper. And again, the action, let's face it, let's call it what it is criminal and corrupt.
My final question to you, Mr. Dennis, is simple. The October 2021 speech which you referred to, in which Farley Augustine at the Magdalena Grand Resort in Tobago produced a social contract. He encouraged all candidates, then candidates for the election on December 6th, to sign this social contract, to enact some level of integrity and transparency. He was even saying that it's to hold everyone accountable. Beyond that, he as chief secretary, if elected, has the power to discipline individuals. Who now has the power to actually hold the chief secretary accountable, even hold the power to discipline Farley Augustine?
Well, that's an interesting question, because by virtue simply of that social contract alone, even without the laws that I spoke about before, on the basis of that social contract alone, Farley Augustine and Zorisha Hackett should be out of office, because he did indicate that any of his secretaries who breach that social contract, they will find themselves outside of the Executive Council. And therefore, he should be outside of the Executive Council, along with Zorisha Hackett. And not only them, but Trevor James should have already been outside of the Executive Council. As it relates to holding the Chief Secretary accountable, the Chief Secretary, just like the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Prime Minister of many jurisdictions that practice the Westminster style of governance, just like Boris Johnson, who had to resign for less, and Theresa Truss, both of them from the United Kingdom, who had to resign for less. All of them serve on the basis of the members of their team the members of the House, those elected members, in the case of the THAs, the assemblymen, having confidence in them. All right? So that, in effect, is really a way to keep the Chief Secretary honest. The people of Tobago will only have an opportunity to vote every 4 years, and the people of Tobago do not even elect the Chief Secretary. The people of Tobago elect assemblymen, and it is those assemblymen that represent the voices and the interests of Tobagonians. And it is those said assemblymen who have the responsibility to elect a Chief Secretary when you peruse the THE Act. And having elected a Chief Secretary, they also have the ability to demonstrate that they have no confidence in the Chief Secretary, if so be the case. And the THA Act prescribes that whenever assemblymen, the majority of them, say by way of a motion that they no longer have confidence in the Chief Secretary, that the Chief Secretary must resign or be removed by the President, right? And therefore, there is an arrangement in place that can hold this Chief Secretary accountable for his actions.
Mr. Dennis, I know I've stretched this interview far beyond the agreed upon time, but thank you very much, sir, for joining me this morning. Thank you very much for saying your thoughts and opinions with us and with the viewing public, and I wish you all the very best, sir. Thank you for making yourself available. Take care.
Same to you. Thank you very much for having me.